Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer, and we have a terrific couple of photographers here this episode. We have James and Karla Murray, and I'm really looking forward to talking with both of them. They have a phenomenal eye, and they've really made their home city of New York City the focus of a great deal of their work. And it's really something to see. And I hope that as you learn more about it, you'll check that out. I want to remind everybody that, as always, the podcast is brought to you by your friends at the Maryland Photography Alliance. You can check out everything they have going on at mdphotoalliance.org. There's always updated information about contests and events that are going on, whether it's photo walks or trips or techniques and styles, etc. There's just a tremendous amount there. If you take a look at the website and you come back a week or so later, you're going to find additional content, new information that will help you improve the craft that we all enjoy so much. So definitely worth doing, and I know you'll enjoy if you make the investment of time. So with that, I'd like to welcome James and Karla Murray to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
So I first became aware of your work looking at your book that came out, I guess it's a few years ago, The Storefronts in New York City. And these are really terrific images of independent stores, smaller businesses, typically in and around New York City. What was the origin of that? How did you decide that was something that you wanted to do?
Well, we've been documenting what we like to call the Mom and Pop Storefronts really since the late 1990s. And at the time, it was all 35 millimeter film because digital, of course, photography didn't even exist back then. And I would say we got into photographing these lovely little storefronts because we began to notice early on that they were disappearing. And the reason that led us to, in the first place, start photographing them is we were documenting the city streets, and for an entirely different project involving graffiti mural art. And graffiti is a very letter-based art form. So we were always looking at the stores, for like inspiration, for like, oh wow, look at the lettering of that hand-painted sign in the window, or look at the lettering of that gorgeous neon sign that sticks out from the building. So we were always fascinated by the appearance of these storefronts. And going into the 5 boroughs of New York City, we live in the East Village, and we've lived there for many, many, many years. And it's undergone a lot of changes, gentrification, and little stores have, disappeared, but it really wasn't our own neighborhood that prompted us to start documenting these lovely stores. It was really going into the outer boroughs. And we would often go back to the same neighborhood after only maybe like a few months had passed. And we would say to ourselves, oh, wow, what happened to that little store on the corner? It closed, and somehow the neighborhood didn't look the same anymore. It didn't feel the same anymore. It lost its charm. It lost the very reason we were attracted to the neighborhood in the first place seemed to be gone when these small stores closed. So we said to ourselves, a little light went off, right, in our mind, and we said, you know what? Let's not only document this beautiful mural art, let's take pictures of these lovely stores because they seem to be closing and we love them so much.
So initially the project was purely aesthetically driven. We liked how the homemade signage, the neon signs manipulated the alphabet, the letters. And then, as we became more and more aware of their significance, we actually went in and interviewed the owners.
Right, and that's when the project took a kind of a second life of its own, because we spoke to the owners and they were first amazed that we were even taking a photo of their storefront. We would compliment them and say, oh, wow, we really love the look of your store. We love the signage. And they would be like, oh, wow, thank you. And then we would ask them all these detailed questions because kind of we wanted to find out why was this store still in business after 100 years or whatever, and another one closed? Did they have a secret recipe? What was
the secret sauce?
Right. What what is the key to their longevity. And they shared with us so many fascinating stories, like about the joys and struggles of operating, an often family-owned business, maybe passed down from generation to generation, plus different like interesting facts and just stuff from the neighborhood. Like, they just really knew everything, and they were just so happy. I mean, beyond happy.
Yeah, the pride really came through.
Right, to share these stories with us, that we said, my gosh, we have to keep on going with this, because this was just a very personal project. Like, we weren't sharing these photos with anybody. We were just keeping them to ourselves because, well, first of all, they were 35 millimeter films. So it was like, and this is before social media. So like you could just take a photo and put it up for the world to see. It was just, I mean, we amassed like thousands of photos, and basically
in shoe boxes.
We were storing them in like shoe boxes because we had so many. I mean, it just became like a true labor of love, but took a life of its own, really.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that New York City is by far one of my favorite cities in the world. And, I can wander as a non-New Yorker, but I can wander around Manhattan and some of the outer boroughs for 8-10 hours or more a day. And one of the things that I really love about your work is a lot of those buildings that I see in those stores, which have been there for as long as you mentioned, I don't go into all of them. Once in a while I'll go in, but what you've done with the books and the New York City bar book that'll be coming out soon is you've taken, the reader, you've taken me into these bars, into these places. You've provided the backstories, and, I'm going to bring up a few of those in a little while, but let me go back a little bit further, because when I had talked to some people and I mentioned that you were going to be guests on the podcast, they said, how did these two meet? How did they even get into photography? This is like, catching lightning in a bottle that this couple enjoys doing this. So at the risk of sounding like an episode of the old This Is Your Life show, how did this pairing come together, and how is it that you're both into photography? Because usually one person in the couple is either really interested and the other is absolutely not interested, or maybe one is really interested and the other is like mildly interested. How did all this happen? How the planets aligned like this?
Well, it really is a planet aligning story, because, I mean, you can probably tell from my accent. I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. I was born in Mount Sinai Hospital, and I was raised in the Bronx. And James, on the other hand...
Yeah, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is often considered the Patterson of the North. It's a industrial area I grew up in that all the industry left. So it was a very Remington Arms left, Singer sewing machines left, all the big industries, Bridgeport Brass, they all left. So I started around an early age, in the 70s, I started leaving my area and just hanging out in the city. And that's exactly how I remember the day so clear. I was watching a basketball game on the Lower East Side in the 80s, and Karla and her two friends were sitting courtside and just having fun with everyone. Just they're loud, and they were just joking with everyone. And I said, who is, I got to get to know her. We ended up talking late into the night, well after the basketball game, and that was it. And we both were into photography, believe it or not, from that day.
But it was a hobby.
It was a hobby.
Right, we were not professional photographers.
Right. The money to develop film was an issue, and we had the old mail away packets, that you would pick up from the drugstore.
Sure.
You would tuck your film in the yellow envelope and then wait to see them, and we would get together and look at our photos together. And
right, because we both came from like working class backgrounds. So I always had a camera, but it wasn't an expensive camera, because I couldn't afford one. Everything that I bought, like that I had a hobby, I worked and bought myself. Like it's I guess
so it wasn't about the equipment for sure.
Right.
At that early stage, I had a 110 Pocket camera.
I think I started with an old
Did you
brownie.
get you got a Corvette.
A hand-me-down brownie, and
Couldn't afford flash.
Yeah, I had a 110. I mean, I even had I went even crazy with the click camera. I even remember some.
So we hung out together 6 years before. We were friends for 6 years before we decided to get married, and then
we were not a couple. We were just friends, and we shared.
We would walk the tracks, do the tunnels. All the graffiti spots.
A lot of similar interests, but our lives were really on different paths at that point.
At that point, right.
And I mean, it's kind of a funny story. We would always meet in the city. James wasn't living in the city at that time, but we would always meet, and we would pick some place, whether it's going to be for lunch or let's go something late, whatever it was. We would say, okay, let's meet here, and we would meet there, and then we would just do whatever we decided to do for that day. And one day we were supposed to meet for lunch and then hang out afterwards, and James stood me up. I mean, he just didn't show up. And then this is before cell phones. So there's not, if somebody just doesn't show up, there's no, it's just like that. That's it. They don't show up. So, I wasn't mad or anything because, I mean, we were friends, and I figured something happened. And, he called me the next day, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, whatever. Some emergency came up with his work or whatever. And, he couldn't meet at our appointed time that we were supposed to meet. And he's like, you know what, let me make it up to you. Let's go out, Friday night. I'll pick you up. And those were his exact words. And I said, okay. Immediately I hang up the phone, and I call my girlfriend at the time, and I said, what does this mean? He's going to pick me up. Pick you up? Well, that means it's a date. She's like, I think this is your, relationship has now taken a turn, because I always liked James, but I never envisioned him as my boyfriend, because we were just friends.
Was James stuck in the friend zone? Was there where we were?
Yeah,
perhaps. And I had a girlfriend. She had boyfriends.
Right. I mean, it just timing wise.
But we enjoyed hanging out together.
Timing wise, it didn't work out. But at that particular time where he stood me up, we were both in between. I wasn't really dating anyone. He wasn't really dating anyone seriously or anything like that. And then my friend said, yeah, I think if he's picking you up, that's a date. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll wear something different. I'll make an effort or something like that. So sure enough, we went out to dinner, and then we ended up actually going to not only did we go to Mom and Pop place for dinner, but then we hung out
at the coffee shop on
Union Square. We went to a club, and then we went at the coffee shop, which sadly is no longer there. It was in. It
was called Coffee Shop.
Right.
It was like a late after-hours spot.
Yeah. New York has at least used to have a few of those kind of places.
Exactly, and
then a month later we were married.
Yeah, a month later we were engaged.
Let's get married. We got married in City Hall.
And that really is it. But
all along it was getting together to do photography and stuff.
Yeah, we always as often as we could, we would always have a camera on hand, but we didn't always take photos of everything that we would see, because still film to us was, a luxury item, and developing it and everything like that.
So it had to be film worthy.
Right.
If you're going to Seinfeld, it's sponge worthy.
Right, exactly.
So that helped us develop, I don't know, a sense of editing, I would say.
And an eye. We were kind of particular about what we would photograph. And I mean, even our newest book, the one that's coming out in this fall, Great Bars in New York City, we're showing our interior photography for the first time. We've always taken interior photographs of the mom and pop stores and the bars and the restaurants and places we visited, but we never really shared them with the public, because the project began, James was saying, very visually oriented, and it was all about the store's signage and things like that. So it didn't really lend itself when we were putting together our storefront books, because the latest one, the Storefront NYC book, is a culmination of, over 20 years
decades
of photographs of these mom and pop stores from the 5 boroughs, but we wanted the exterior, like the facade, to be the hero, like the store itself, and not show the interior, and especially not really include people in the photographs. Even with the storefronts, very rarely would we include a person in the photograph, because we realized that they quickly would become the star of the photo, right, and not the storefront itself, which is, right, what we wanted to shine. Like, we wanted the storefront itself to shine, because we really wanted people to be aware of the importance of these lovely independently owned stores, because so many of them, they're like pillars of the community. They're like little ad hoc community centers. Right. I mean, if you want to find out what's happening in a neighborhood in New York City, go to your local barber shop and get your hair cut. Spend some time talking to the barber, and he'll probably tell you everything that's going on in the neighborhood, and maybe more than you ever would want to know. Right.
And as we went over the decades, we started to pick up different, understand the camera better, understand what we're doing.
Right, we're totally self-taught.
The type of lenses you use, it all began to learn over decades. I mean, a slow process of learning.
Right.
So what, when you all start undertaking photography together, you get married, you start taking storefront photos using film. What are you doing, each of you doing professionally at that point while you're enjoying the storefront photos? Were you working in photography professionally, or was that kind of a hobby and you had other things you were doing as a job?
That's exactly it. Photography was a hobby. We were not working in photography business or field or anything even really related to it at all. Right. I mean, at the time, I think I was working like 2 jobs. James was working like 3 jobs when we first got married. I mean, just to make ends meet. I mean,
yeah, sure.
Even living in the East Village, we picked it because it was relatively inexpensive at the time. It no longer is, but especially like our neighborhood, we picked the East Village just because it had so many fun things to do for free. Great little inexpensive restaurants, bars, clubs.
And we would just walk around and look at window displays. Right. To be honest.
Yeah. And, we could easily entertain ourselves with, not even spending a dollar in our pocket. It was very, very, very easy to do at the time. I mean, to a degree, there's still things that you can do like that, but it's not nearly, as much.
Then we finally got a 35 millimeter camera.
Right. I think we both.
Digital, I mean. When
but digital wasn't until, I don't think we had.
Because they were beyond, once they first came out, they were beyond our reach.
We didn't get our first digital camera, I think, until 2008. We were very late in
adapting that.
Adopting it, yeah. Right, and going kind of like digitally. I mean, for the storefront project, we kind of felt very strongly that we wanted to stay with analog, because to us, it's like these time-worn facades and the whole mom and pop aesthetic. It kind of lent itself to
the grain and to
the patina and everything that you get with film. Like, we really wanted to keep that same look and feel throughout it. But our latest book, The Great Bars in New York City, that's entirely shot. It's with a digital SLR. So we did eventually switch to digital. I mean, and it's professionally too. I mean, now we're professional photographers as well. That's how we make our living, doing architectural and interior photography. On occasion, we'll have a special client that might say, I'd love some photos using your medium format. Like, we have a lot of cameras now, but that's a very rare client, because they have to, one, spend a little bit more money, B,
it's not be as quick turnaround.
Exactly. Not have
it's mainly speed driven.
Right. A lot of our work we have to turn over, in a fairly fast pace. It's just not possible. So the Great Bars of New York City book is entirely digital, but one of the reasons we did that was we had to shoot these interiors very fast because we went when it was not really, there's no customers inside, as you can see. I mean, customers would begin to come in.
Sure. Yeah, we didn't understand that. Bars in New York open 8 a.m.
Yeah, there's a few bars in the book that are.
Isn't that crazy?
They're lining up there at 8 a.m.
And they're literally, we said to ourselves, when we're putting this book together, we're not going to.
This will be nice because you don't have to get up early.
Yeah, we're not known as, like, if you know us, we're not the earliest of risers. We never have been.
Yeah.
We have kind of that East Village artist aesthetic, I guess you could say. Yeah, so I call it the East Village time, like
so the turnaround time inside the bar, some of the bars we only had like 10 or 15 minutes that the manager would show up.
Right. Or
I am chomping at the bit to delve into the new book because you were so kind to send me an advanced digital copy, and I've ordered a hard copy, but that'll be a month or so till that arrives. But going through the digital version was incredible. Before we jump headlong into that, because I was just loving every page, but. So when you're making these analog images of the storefront, how do you convert that enjoyment, that hobby, and those images into that first book? Because I think that, I'm sure the story is fascinating, and I'm sure that people who are listening who have whatever interest that they have, and just generally they think, I have this interest and I'm proficient at it. How did these two turn that proficiency and that focus into a book? How did you guys make that transition and make that happen?
It was funny because as we were shooting graffiti art, we were in St. Mark's Books. And if you're from New York, you knew it. It was 3rd Avenue and Stuyvesant Street. And we were in there late
by Cooper Union.
Right by Cooper Union.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is. Yeah.
We were in there late one night, and we knew we had all these graffiti photos, so we were flipping through books, and we found a skateboard book that we really liked the layout, the whole feel of it, holding it in your hand, the thickness of it. And we said, geez, maybe we could do a book someday. And we copied down, honest to God, the address on the back of the book, the publisher's address.
We didn't buy the book because we didn't even have we didn't even have money to buy the book. Like we would just stand at the front table of St. Mark's Books on rainy nights and go through the books, and they got to know us. That's how we look through photography books because we're like, okay, it's too much, and we have.
It's like a library. You just read it and then you leave. That's Steven
Sprouse, the designer, was next to us doing the exact same thing, and we met a bunch of people. But the book we saw was a skateboard book. We copied down the publisher's address. The next day we went over to like a color Xerox place. We Xeroxed some of our photos on
that we had printed out
11 by 14 sheets. Right. We color Xeroxed those. We stuck them in a manila envelope.
Yeah, I think what I did is because there's all 35 millimeter. I think I taped like photos together to form like a panorama in some of the cases, and
the old connectors.
Right. So like, okay, this would be how the whole wall would look like, because we would shoot it in tiny little pieces,
right,
and then put it together.
And we had fun putting it together. We Xeroxed it. We never thought anything would come of it. We just mailed it off to San Francisco.
Right, like pie in the sky.
It was like playing lotto. It kept us occupied for a day. And we mailed it off. And then 3 days later, we got a phone call.
Yeah.
From the editor.
Right. This is like on our, landline, because this is like, again, before like we even had a cell phone. I think cell phones existed back then.
And he's like, we love what you sent us.
Yeah, well, let's put a book together. We're like, what?
We're like, are you kidding me?
We didn't know the first thing about putting a book together. We're like, oh my God.
We're getting to storefront. I'm not just rambling.
Right.
He flew from San Francisco to New York and met with us. And we're sitting in our apartment, and Karla had hung up some of our storefront photos.
Had framed them because like we like them, and we like looking.
Yeah, some of the spots we love so much.
Right.
And he's looking at the graffiti work, and all of a sudden he looks over at the wall and he's like, "What are those?" And Karla explained to us what she did to you about the storefronts.
I'm like, they're just these mom and pop stores, around the city.
We didn't think he'd have any interest because he's not even from New York.
Right, he's not from New York, so why would he care about
and he's
some of these stores? And he's like,
"Do you have any more of them?"
And I'm like, oh, do I have
sure.
more?
We start pulling out all these shoe boxes.
Shoe boxes that I've got lined up in my closet where shoes should be, but he's now taken over with boxes of.
And he's like, oh, these are
photos.
wonderful. And Karla adds, I have all the interviews with the owners on micro cassette tapes, and we bring out another huge box of like thousands of micro cassette tapes.
Right, because that's how we used to record it. Because again, before digital, I had that little micro cassette recorder, and we used to go inside the store, and I would tell the owner, "Listen, I'm just going to record you just so I can take notes because I can't write fast enough, and I want to make sure that I get the information correct. This is just for our purposes only." And they felt comfortable with that. Because we tried using a video camera, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, it just really cramped their style. And one guy wanted to go home and shave and something better, and it just became this
the
thing.
whole spontaneity.
The interviews didn't work as well.
Right.
It's different when you're holding that little Get Smart, like from the TV show, little microphone.
Sure.
Right,
and
I wouldn't
they
put
forget
it
it's even there. They
I
just
wouldn't
start
even
talking.
put it in their face. Like I would just leave it on the counter or something, and
And we would spend hours in the store, just hanging out, talking to them, really relaxed. And so our editor said, you know what, this should be your next book.
He
started taking things out of the frames in our apartment and folding them into the book size of the graffiti book. The graffiti book was Broken Windows, Graffiti NYC. It did very well. But he's like, oh, no, this is your next project. And that's how we ended up getting a book deal. It was copying down that address that night, getting it to the right person. He's like, what you did was 100% correct. He's like, I want to rip open the envelope, and I want to know what the book's about. He's like, I talked to a lot of people. I asked them, what's your book about? And they can't even tell me.
No, he said, you know what they would do is they would put a CD in the mail, like a CD full of images. And he's like, he's like, I won't even.
No, I got to load it. Sometimes it's the long format, and I got so many envelopes. He's like, I like to just tear it open, hold it in my hands, and understand what the project is right in front of me. And he's like, that's why you got your graffiti book.
Like, that's why we even tell people today, like we've had an intern with us, to print your photos. Like, even if you take digital photos, don't just look at them on your screen or your iPhone or your whatever, or Android. It doesn't matter what you use to take it now, but print them out, because it's the world of difference. And we learned a lot from that. I mean, a lot even in photography, because we would spend a long time laying them all out, like on our big table, and we'd say what works about this one versus what doesn't work with this one. And we would study it. And we developed I definitely say we have a certain style of photography when it comes to storefronts. And that's very linear.
Yeah.
That's something that...
Like you just walked up and you're standing in front of it. There's nothing to distract you. There's nothing fussy about it. It's there. You're standing there. You're interacting with it.
Right. That's something, that wasn't something that just started from the very beginning. This is, just taking a lot of them and just seeing what worked and what we liked aesthetically. And we developed this linear approach. Now, I mean, if we see a new store, because we're still photographing these mom and pop stores today. I mean, new businesses are opening up all the time. I mean, yes, we've lost a lot. But especially in our neighborhood where the footprints of the buildings are very small, sometimes these little stores, even if they close, it's replaced by another little store, which is great. That's exciting. I mean, that's what New York is all about. New things cropping up all the time. So we're still documenting them. But now it's very quick, because we've taken so many that we know exactly how we want to photograph it. There's no thinking about the angle or doing this or doing that. I mean, literally, you could say the name of the store and we're done photographing it by the time you say the
And then as we worked it out, we chose different lenses, and we started to understand the settings of the camera.
It's all very, 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 very simple. Right. I mean, and we pretty much used, it's always been a Canon camera. I mean, not that, we're not sponsored or anything by Canon, but this is just something that's what we got from the very, very beginning when we finally purchased a 35 millimeter. And the reason we chose Canon, over Nikon or something like that, is that at the time it weighed less. And
oh, wow. So it was practical. It was a practical consideration.
It really was. Because when you're lugging this thing around, and we walk everywhere, all the photos were taken not from like us driving around and getting out of a car. It's walking, it's on foot, always on foot. We found that even if we took public transportation, like a subway to get out to like a neighborhood, or say like Staten Island. I mean, we can't walk to Staten Island. We have to take the ferry and then, walk or whatever afterwards. I mean, Staten Island is probably the worst borough to photograph and walk because it's just so hilly and it doesn't really have very good public transportation once you get off the ferry. But it's always about walking, because we would find that you would see so many things that walking that you didn't see, like if you were even riding a bus or something.
Yeah, you're much more engaged.
Yeah,
with the community.
Right, and I mean, it's just we did it very haphazardly. I mean, I wish we could say that we were very organized in our photography. We were not. I mean, it was more like, where should we go today? Oh, let's go to Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we walk there or should we take the train? Because we have walked to Bed-Stuy from our apartment many times in the East Village.
Over the bridges.
Yeah, you go over the bridge. I mean, it's a long walk, but if you make a day of it, like especially on the weekend or something.
Enjoy it.
Well, we enjoy it, and we always, for a long time, we've had dogs as well, and so we bring our dog with us. It's like exercise for the dog as well. So it's exercise for all of us. It's an adventure, and then we just say, okay, let's start walking here, and like,
oh, what's that down there? What's going on over here? And it just led us to
right. We wouldn't plan out a route. We would just start walking. Usually it started with a major avenue or a major street because, especially if we took a subway to get there, but then we would branch out to these little side streets.
Right.
And that's where we'd find like these little gems. I like to call them the gems.
Yeah.
This little place on the corner surrounded all by like residential, row houses or something like that. Most unlikely spot to even see a store. And then you find one and you'd be like, oh, wow,
right.
Look at this.
Your books are, they're really creating a historical document of the city. I know I was in the city a few months ago, and I was so bummed out to walk past and see that Village Cigars was closed. And that storefront, you talk about iconic. I mean, I can't even guess how many decades that had been there, but that was like a beacon of that community.
It certainly was. I mean, that one, it really hit us hard when it closed. There's certain places, in all honesty, that in our minds we thought would never close. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because even when we were ongoing with taking our storefront photography, like a place like CBGB, which James and I went to many times, and we live just a short distance away, walk from our apartment, we never thought to photograph it because we took it for granted. We always thought that it would be there.
I mean, how could it not be there?
Right, how could it not be there? And one day, I remember the day in my mind. We were coming back from, one of we call them our photo safaris, because that's what it would be like. Our safari to see what little mom and pop store we could find that day. And we had maybe like 4 frames left on our, 36 exposure.
Our roll. Yeah.
Our roll. And at the time, we got all our color photographs developed by a place called Alkit, and it was on Park Avenue South. And it was a really great independently owned photo place. And it was very popular. In fact, a lot of the glossy fashion magazines, they would get their film developed there. They did a quick turnaround time. And what we would do is, because we took so many photographs, is I would pay in advance in bulk. So they had this deal, like if you were a photographer and you did a lot of, developing in film, you could pay in bulk and you could get like upfront, whatever it was, a few $100s for X amount of things to be developed. And they give you a decent break.
Right.
And, we got to know the guys, and I would develop it off. And they said, lots of times they would be ready in like under an hour, because they'd be like, oh yeah, we just got all this batch in from, such and such magazine.
Yeah, Bazaar.
Right. We're ready to roll. And then here, put this one in it too. And he's like, okay, yeah, come, take a walk
Yeah, see you in an hour.
You'll see you in less than an hour. And we'd be like psyched. Okay, great. So we had like 3 or 4 frames left. And we were just going to drop it off at Alkit. And we were walking down Bowery on our way to Park Avenue South.
Yep.
And I said to James, gee, we have these, we're going to just advance it anyway.
Let's just shoot it.
Eat these 4 frames. Who cares? We want to get this roll developed. We want to see what we got today.
Let's shoot CBGBs.
Let's just take these photos of CBGBs. Why not? And then lo and behold, like I think a year later, it ends up closing. And we said to ourselves, oh my God, can you imagine
if we never shot it?
Never photographed it.
And then the same became true of Lennox Lounge up in Harlem.
Right. There was
that I thought would be there forever.
Right. Many instances that sadly that we didn't take the photo. I remember like going back to when we were first going out and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
Carmelita's reception, all these places that we used to go to in our neighborhood.
The clubs, the after-hour clubs.
Right. We never took all these photos. We should have, but hindsight's 20/20, as they always say. But
so in your wildest dreams, when you all started, walking around as friends, or when you first got married, would you ever have thought that you'd have work published in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the London Telegraph? That's pretty heady stuff for 2 people walking around with, sort of inexpensive cameras, just enjoying their hobby based on whatever the budget was at that time. And I mean, can you kind of believe how you all have evolved this hobby into now?
It's a dream come true. I mean, it truly is. And we would never imagine that in a million years. I mean, growing up, like to say, oh, I'm going to be a photographer seemed utterly ridiculous because you wouldn't have any money.
Yeah, that wasn't going to happen in my house. I'll tell you that right now. My father wasn't going to go for that.
He'd say you want to be a what?
Yeah. Exactly. Go cut the grass and
right.
Worry about school right now.
Right. No way. I mean, it's interesting because my mom was a medical illustrator. We always we didn't have any money. I mean, she didn't make any money doing that. Being an artist, it just didn't make any money. She didn't even get credit for all the things that she drew.
Right.
I mean, of course, it was a different time back then, and I don't think that kind of stuff would ever fly anymore. But you know what? I saw the struggle from her being an artist. That no, I just
right.
Yeah, it just wasn't possible. It was just a hobby. It was just a hobby that was a passion, and we did spend a lot of time on it. I mean, honestly,
it's our whole
world.
That's all we do.
We worked Saturdays. Both James and I worked on Saturdays. I mean, we worked 6 days a week. The only really day off that we had when we were like for the first, I would say, 15 years of our marriage, even was Sunday. That's the only day we had. We made the most of it.
Yeah.
We would get up and just get going and do whatever we set out to do, with our cameras, and just make a whole day of it, make the most of it. And
probably one of the things I remember, and I just thought of, was when we had the show in Soho. We had a show of our storefront photography. A gallery owner contacted us, which was exciting. But she called us one day and she's like, Sarah Jessica Parker just bought 17 of your photos.
Wow.
Large scale.
Right. She was just wrapping up filming Sex and the City movie. And she gave it parting gifts to the cast, some framed Mom and Pop photos. And we were
cool.
Blown away. We were blown away.
They were like, wow, people are, we didn't think, for working together as a couple, you get isolated and you think it's just your interest and your thing. And when that happened, I'm like, wow. And then we ended up having a show in Germany, and we did a signing in Paris and Berlin. And
it's honestly been a dream come true. So
right.
We always tell people the dream big because we did, and it worked. I mean, it was hard work.
It's hard work. We had like Karla said, we attempted to have a couple interns along the way and tell them the story how after the intern hung out with us,
his father called us up on the phone, and he's like, "Oh, you cured of him of photography. Thank you, thank you," because he honestly
he had no idea.
Right, he really didn't want his son to be a photographer, but that's what his son wanted to be.
Right, so he contacted. He's like, "Let him hang out with these guys." He knew us.
Right, he knew us. He
knew how hard we worked.
Right, he was a client of ours, and he said, "Would you mind taking my son, around with you just to see what a day in the life or something like that?" And we're like, "Oh, okay." Why doesn't he just spend an entire week with us, and we'll take him to all our shoots, and he'll get a feel for it, see if he wants to apply, to photography school. And I don't know, he told us that he's like, oh, I guess he thought it was just all glamour, and he didn't realize that a lot of time is spent, processing and doing things in front of the computer now, and that it's not just all just taking a photo.
And learning every aspect of what you're doing in the camera and why you're doing it, and putting all that together without any education on it. And you just have to love it, and it has to be everything to you.
Right.
One of the things that as we're talking, I'm thinking about Florida, where I know you are at the moment, and I can remember early 1990s going down to Miami Beach and South Beach and seeing these Art Deco buildings, whether they were small boutique hotels or even bigger hotels that had fallen into disrepair, and some had been renovated, but that's an area as well that the past it's sort of like at one point anyway was crumbling. And books like yours are the types that, as I said earlier, they become these historical documents, because otherwise people can just walk past or drive past buildings and say something like, oh, that must have been nice once. But if you have books that document what it was like when it either existed, because it's not there anymore, or it's been renovated and they didn't keep the old style, and I just think that what you're doing is incredible, and the amount of work that you describe that you both put in is I won't even say probably, I'll say it's almost certainly a recipe as to how you've become successful, because you've got the enjoyment, you've got the skill, and you've got the work ethic. Because if any of those ingredients are missing, you probably don't have a new book coming out, because or an initial book. So it's all of that. And I think, I don't know how old the intern was, but you just see so many folks who are about instant gratification. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that's just not how it works in the real world.
Exactly. We met with the curator at Brooklyn Museum, and I remember her words exactly. She's no longer working there, but at the time she told us, everyone wants to be an instant artist. That's exactly what she said to us when she was looking at our photographs. They were the mom and pop stores, and she's like, oh, this is an incredible documentation. We felt so flattered. Like I said, it was just a very personal project. We did it for the love of, and also it was kind of our way of giving back to the city that we love, because sharing them in the end and creating the books that we have, it was our way of saying, hey, go support these little small mom and pop shops, because don't take them for granted, because they can close, and once they do and they're gone, you can boo-hoo about it all you want, but it's not coming back. So the point is to support them today while they're still here.
Yeah.
And you might be able to help save them. And I could say the one of the proudest achievements, besides having the books and shows and all that, is that I can say with 100% that we've single-handedly helped save a few stores on our own, just by putting the word out. And that's because of the power of social media now, that they need people's help. And the owners, have told us this. This isn't something like that we're just saying on our own. The owner told us, all these people came in because you put this up on your Instagram, or got the word out, and then more people put it up on their Instagram, and the word spread and spread and spread. and you guys helped save our stores.
Right.
And that happened in particular a couple times during the pandemic.
Yep.
Oh, we noticed that they were really struggling. Beloved stores, we know the owners. I mean, we spent so much time speaking.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to go there.
Speaking to the owners, like in person, not just calling them on the phone or anything like that. Going there.
Yeah, you have to actually go there, and hang out. Like I said earlier, me and Karla would hang out for hours.
Right, they became our friends.
There's
our friends.
There's a pork store in Brooklyn, and we hung out all day. And they have an 80-year-old delivery boy who was singing us Sinatra.
Oh, wow.
Characters making fun of every customer, like in a good-natured way, like just ribbing, like a New York way.
Right. I mean, it was a pork store, essentially, like a deli.
Right.
But he came in and he'd just take a loaf of bread, because they also sold bread.
Yeah, cut it himself.
And he'd start making himself a sandwich.
Right on the butcher block.
And
he would hang out.
Go back behind the counter.
Each one had a relationship with the store, and we learned from that. And we meet a lot of folks now who try to do that via email, and these guys don't email. They don't.
They're old school.
Right.
Yeah, they don't.
But some of them don't. But it's really, they became friends with us, and when we saw that they were struggling, we're like, oh my God, what can we do to help? We have to help you. I mean, the books are great, but the books don't reach everybody. So that's why we really started with social media as well.
Right.
I mean, to really help get the word out, that support them, you really can make a difference. And it's just so personally rewarding.
Yeah. Because they're like community centers. They're ad hoc community centers.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you guys had mentioned a little while ago aesthetic, and I know that one of the questions that I get regularly from listeners to the podcast is about gear and gear choices, and you can go down a rabbit hole, and at some point it becomes kind of senseless. But with using that term aesthetic, my question is, for a lot of your storefront work, and maybe this applies to the bars of New York City, but do you have a particular lens or set of lenses that are kind of your go-tos?
For our exterior storefront photography, I would say, especially like the latest book, Storefront NYC, I would say, I mean, it has a combination of older photos plus new ones. Like that's a project of like kind of our other books that we had on the subject, going back and taking some of the old material and then adding new material as well. Right. But all pretty much shot with our 28 millimeter lens, a fixed millimeter.
Fixed 28.
Right, not an expensive lens. I don't even know if Canon makes them anymore. Canon's been, unfortunately, they're paring down their offerings, and they're going, they're full on with the mirrorless, which we haven't adopted yet. I mean, I guess eventually we'll have to, but
you'll save weight, I can tell you that.
Right.
Yeah. So that 28 lens, we found it was like kind of our sweet spot, mm-hmm. where it provided like enough, edge to edge coverage without any distortion. Right. I mean, I guess that would be a lot of
times we're shooting around trees and parking meters and stuff.
Right. Like I'll press James and I both people ask us all the time, who takes the photos? James and I both take the exterior photos. I would say the daytime ones, I would say a large percentage of them are taken by me.
Yeah.
And you can see, if you look in the book, my reflection in, a window or a door or something like that. You can see who took the photo. Most of the time it's me. And that's only because I'm skinnier. Yeah. And I can fit myself up against, like I'll press my body up against a tree or parked car or whatever it is to take this photo without any impediments.
And I would do all the tripod work.
And James is the one.
Because Karla doesn't,
He's taller, and we have a really tall tripod, like one of the.
Oh, and it's a pain in the neck.
Right, it's a man photo. And you probably want to know equipment. It's a nice tripod, light carbon fiber, but Manfrotto,
full size.
Yeah, but it's one of their taller ones. if it's extended all the way up, I can't even see, I can't see what I'm taking a photo of.
Yeah. They can go up pretty high.
Yeah. So James is 6'2.5".
Yeah.
And he can see. So that's an easy division. He takes anything with that we use.
Well, we got ridiculous with it. We would wear Con-Ed, the electric company, vests.
Right. We'd cone
Oh
off
wow.
in front of stores, so they wouldn't.
And I would block traffic and.
Oh my, I love it.
And cone off parking spots.
Yeah, we had a friend.
We got insane.
We had a friend that worked. And we were complaining to him. We're like,
we're telling him the story how sometimes you have to wait for a UPS truck
or Con-Ed truck. We're like, you guys, like you park your big giant Con-Ed truck, because they're doing like some repair down in the street, and right in front of the storefront, and it's a really narrow sidewalk, and now we can't take the photo.
The light is perfect. The time of day is perfect. Right, everything is good.
And it would be so annoying to us. And he's like, oh, I'll hook you up. And I'm like, what do you mean you hook me up? He's like, here, take a clipboard. Here, I'll give you one of our clipbours.
Yeah, here's a couple.
Here's vests. Here's some cones.
Here's a hard hat.
And just, why don't you get there early enough? Maybe, we'll look at alternate side of the street parking, and just, the cars clear out. Just clear it all out for yourself, and make it like you're going to be digging, like we do.
So doing site measurements.
Like you're gonna start digging in an hour or so. So
that's amazing.
So that's what we
all
would
these
do.
ridiculous things to get.
I mean, we didn't do that all the time, but it was just like particular.
Like Bleecker Street is always a nightmare to shoot,
right?
Just because there's so much traffic, so many tourists, so many deliveries and everything, and that's what we had to resort to.
Yeah, it came down to that to get the photo. We'd be like, oh my God, because when we realized that these stores were closing, then we wisened to the idea, like, we're like, oh my God, if we see it, we better take the photo. Like,
that's how fast they're closing.
Right, it could be gone tomorrow. Like we have to camp out here,
right.
and
GVGV put the fear of God in us.
Right, get this photo before they disappear. I mean, even new places. I mean, some of these places they don't even last a year now. I mean, it's very sad. Whether it's just they only get a 1-year lease, and then their rent is raised too high, or
now the interiors. Let's not get too far off track.
Right,
the lens.
Right, the interiors are different. The great bars in New York City. I mean, there's exterior photographs there too.
That's where you shot.
Right, but the interior photographs are pretty much a 20 millimeter lens.
20.
That we went a little bit more wide angle.
20 prime.
Right. We don't generally use the 20 for the exterior storefronts because it does have a little bit more distortion.
Yeah.
At the edges.
Yeah.
And we need that full edge to edge.
Even the Canons, they vary from lens to lens. We've been through so many of them. You'll have a soft corner.
Right.
And
yeah, we bought a lot of 20 lenses. We dropped them. I mean,
So are you shooting usually like at f8, f9, f10, or?
Well, interior usually a higher f. I mean, for the storefronts.
The big sweeping overviews.
Storefronts, no, we don't need a big f because that's all daytime, and there's usually plenty of light, and it's usually pretty much. I mean, it depends on the 3D of the storefront. But if they're a
and
flat,
how high it is,
right? A flat storefront, you could get away with 5, 6, 7, 1.
Okay.
Not all the time. It depends.
Depends.
But again,
how far you are away from it.
We've taken so many now that we know. We're like, okay, that's a 9.0. Or
sure, yeah, you just know at this point.
Right. That's an 11. Like done. We don't even think of it. Like,
right. Karla will just look over to me when we're in front of him, just by the light. I'll be like, oh, just go with 9.0.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
because,
let me ask you this. So when I started looking at the new book, okay, and this is the Great Bars of New York City, I looked at the table of contents, and some of these locations you chose a total of, I believe, 30. And some of them, I'm aware of, the Stonewall Inn, which is, of course, iconic, especially regarding LGBTQ plus community, and just very renowned, as it should be. So that seemed like that made lots of logical sense to me. Then I looked at places that I have walked past for literally decades, like the Finelli Cafe. I've seen that sign. I see it every time. I have never been inside of it. And I thought, okay, now I get to see the inside of it. So my questions are two, at least at this moment. My first is, how did you choose the bars to include? And how did you deal with, numbers 31, 32, 33 that just didn't quite make it? And then for the interiors, I love the details. I love the wide shots of the interiors, but how did you choose the compositions for the interiors and what you wanted to highlight in each bar's chapter? So that was my initial thought, those couple of things.
In answer to your multi-pronged question,
Of course.
First, picking the locations, we knew when we were talking this over with Presto, which is the same publisher that published our Storefront NYC book, we knew we wanted to include both the exterior, but highlight our interior photographs to help tell the story because they're so beautiful inside. So in particular, we needed places that had a certain photogenic quality. It couldn't be just a bar that we liked and that we went to, but really inside was like, meh,
right.
Like not that inspiring photographically. So that eliminated some places right away because, now we've announced the book on our social media. People say, oh, did you include such and such and such and such? And I feel badly because we know these places, but they didn't make the cut, as you could say. But there's reasons behind that. So one, the interior had to look good. It wasn't so important, the exterior this time. Of course, the exterior looking good is a plus, but the interior really had to shine for us. Two, we wanted a mix of historic places, ones that have been in business for a really long time that have, an interesting story behind them. Because to us, it's not just the photo, it's the story behind the photo.
Right.
And three, a mix of places that maybe don't have the history, but have their own draw, I would say, or a total neighborhood dive bar that really probably not many people have heard about, or a total neighborhood place that if you weren't from the neighborhood, you would never go to. Like that, the place, the Upper East Side, Bailey's Corner Pub.
Okay.
You don't live in the Upper East Side. You've probably never been to Bailey's Corner Pub. You probably never thought to go to Bailey's Corner Pub. So that made it interesting to us. And
it was important for us to have all like social strata also.
Right.
Like the working man's bar all the way up to the hotel bar.
Right. The quintessential working man's bar being Rudy's Bar and Grill by far, because they've kept their prices so low and affordable, and they give you a free hot dog. You get a drink, free hot dog.
So he's like, for the owner was telling us, he's like, for a couple of dollars, you can come in, have a shot and a beer, have a couple hot dogs, and it's a working man's place. It's you have a nice night out. And
you're not breaking the bank. You're certainly not at Rudy's Bar and Grill. And Rudy's also has never been about like the in place or like, okay,
the Instagram photo.
Or we have only a certain kind of clientele or anything like that. That's a place where a celebrity can be sitting down right next to, your
the Con Ed worker.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Construction worker, whatever. And it's happened many times.
Right.
He even told us the story about of just various celebrities coming in, right? Slash and
Drew Barrymore.
Drew. But even before she was age. But picking them was definitely difficult.
It was like trying out that sweet spot of.
We're given a page count. When working with putting together a book, you're given the page count right off the bat. Like you know what the page count is going to be.
You know your real estate you have.
Right. So we could have gone with a few more, but then it would be less photos per each one. And
we really wanted to tell the story of each one, so you got a real feel for it.
Exactly. So I feel like we did the best job that we could of including ones that had different historical significance, different cultural significance, different clientele. Like from going into the King Cole Bar to
Right. Like you mentioned, Stonewall, the significance of that.
right.
And also Julius, which may even be more significant to the LGBT
movement, right?
movement.
But doesn't nearly get the
Those
press.
had to go in.
Right.
So you work through a
Stonewall.
list of like what has to be in here. White Horse Tavern has to be.
Right.
Finelli Cafe, like you mentioned, has to be in here.
Right, and then something newer, like Please Don't Tell. I mean,
which kicked off the whole speakeasy.
Right, the speakeasy thing it's like a whole thing now, and they were really the very first ones to, popularize that speakeasy theme. And now it's like, all over the place. Hey, let's go to this speakeasy. But I mean, we'll see once it comes out what everybody says. But
right.
I feel like we did a good job.
Right.
I mean, could we make another book? Absolutely. I mean, and this was only Manhattan. This wasn't our choice. That was also spoken with the publisher and our editor. They felt very strongly to only pick Manhattan locations, which is great because it helped narrow it down as well.
Right.
Because clearly we can make another book with more Manhattan places. I mean,
Sure.
we're only giving a certain amount of,
let alone
Brooklyn
Brooklyn and let alone the Bronx.
Right.
And the bar owners were pretty receptive to it when you reached out to them.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the places we had known already because we had photographed their stores for their fronts for our previous books. Because we have a book. I mean, it's difficult to find now, but it's called New York Nights, and it was all about photographing stores and the bars and the restaurants, but at night.
Late at night.
I mean, that one in particular, I mean, all of the photos were taken late
as late as we could.
As late as we could. I mean, sometimes 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, our whole world changed upside down when we decided to concentrate on that because, I mean, we're night owls to begin with, but now, we would get home at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and then it was difficult to go to bed.
Right.
So
well, the cover at that, I'll always remember it, and I don't want to get too far off track. The cover of that book is Carnegie Deli.
Oh, classic.
Right. I remember the night we went there, it was about 7 degrees. Me and Carl had the Carhartt coveralls because it was cold, the workers wear. And
your fingers would freeze.
And it was about
2:30
in the morning, and we're out standing in the middle of 7th Avenue with the tripod set up because there's there's only a few taxi cabs going by. And we got a picture on the cover of a exhausted waitstaff leaning against the counter. And the wind was howling down 7th Avenue, and we had all this it looked like polar exploration gear on. And we're like, what are we doing? Yeah, we're both looking at each other, and someone would walk.
The dog was shivering. I remember.
Yeah,
he was
the dog.
shivering.
We always bring our dog with us, and a then garbage truck would pull up, and we're both standing there in the middle of 7th Avenue, and we're just shaking our heads like, oh my God, this has gotten too far. But to answer your other question about the bars, the interior shots, I knew. And me and Karla both made a decision early on for the interiors to shoot kind of a large shot, kind of medium shots, and then concentrate on details that you might overlook. And that's how we kind of wanted to tell the story of the shot when you first walk in, like wow, the wow factor, like wow, I haven't been in here. This place is great.
Right, to give
like Old Town Bar, you walk in, you're like wow.
To give you an overview, like okay,
it's like an establishing shot.
Exactly. We think of it like a movie.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, it's
then the second kind of shot is like where you would spend the night in a booth or at the bar, or kind of shots of just like, okay, now I'm inside. Let me enjoy my night here. And then the last one, I think of Horseshoe Bar, 7B. We shot way up by the ceiling on one of the pillars is a little plaque of a hand holding a goblet. That even the owner doesn't know when that showed up or what it's doing.
It was from when it was a catering
hall.
Right.
Like years ago. We shot that and included it because we're like, oh, that's something you might be like, oh, where is that in there? And I've been in there my whole life. I don't even know where that is in that kind of shot. And that's how we kind of worked through each spot. Sometimes it worked. Some places didn't have a shot like that, but we always wanted to include something like that you would not notice.
A little nugget. I mean,
I loved looking at those details and not only the images, but of course reading the write-up. I could very easily see New Yorkers and non-New Yorkers taking that book with them and using it as a checklist of bars to see while they're in the city, everything from a 10 bar crawl to, if you're in the city for a few days over a weekend, try to go to 2 a night and then do more the next time you're in the city. So, I mean, I see it as a great book. I see it as a reference guide, almost as a checklist, for those who are inclined. So, one thing I want to make sure that we let listeners know, and I know you're in pre-order mode now because I jumped on that right away. What's the best way for people to go ahead and pre-order the book if they like? What's the website or what's the best way?
Well, I mean, we did like a little launch, on our website. You can email us through it. Just give us an email and say, I'd like to pre-order a signed copy. It'll come directly from us. But there's also pre-orders available on the internet as well. I mean, of course, we like to support independently owned bookstores. The books that they're pre-ordering from us, it's just a special something that we're kind of doing just because we've built up a large social media following. So we'd like to kind of give back to the people that have helped us throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that pre-orders a book from us, you get
a little postcard.
You get a free, here it is.
That's great. Yeah.
Just something special.
4x6 postcards. So not only do you get it signed, I mean, we're willing to, personalize it if you want a little,
like a note, so to speak.
It's being given as a gift or something like that. That's directly through us. We were doing it just Venmo as a payment, but if somebody's interested, they certainly can email us, j&k@jamesandkarlamurray.com. But we always like to say to try to support your independently owned bookstore. I mean, we realize that some people are located in areas that don't have an independently owned bookstore, so they must order, online or something like that from one of the big places, and they have pre-orders available too. But we always like to say, if you can support an independently owned store, that's how all these projects began. So we like to always give back to
the best way to pre-order
the little places. Yeah, so you can go to. You can email us, or you can go to the Prestel website, and then it will bring you to like a drop-down list of the different places, like the big internet houses.
Sure.
We won't have to say their names, and then it will show you, okay, here's some recommendations from small stores as well.
And what are the social media, your website and Instagram, et cetera, that listeners can kind of delve more into, all of your work? What are those so people know what they are?
Our website is our full name. It's www.james, JAMESAND for and Karla, KARLA Murray.com. So it's a long website, jamesandkarlamurray.com, but thank God we don't have a super long first name or last name.
Right.
could be worse. Right. So that's our website, and there's also some portfolios of some of the images, from our book on that. We're working on adding more to that now. Our Instagram and YouTube is @JamesandKarla, and it's just one word, @JamesandKarla, no Murray, JAMESANDKARLA.
Well,
and announcing for sure on Instagram, we're going to be we already have some book signing events. I mean, I can just say it now, but I haven't really announced it. But, by the time this comes up, it probably will be announced. We'll be having our very first book signing event / release party on Thursday, September 12th, 2024 at the lovely independently owned bookstore / gallery, Village Works Gallery and Bookstore, and that's 12 St. Mark's Place. It's free to attend. It's 6 to 8 p.m. and we'll be there, and so will our dog Hudson, because he's part of our photographic team. And certainly everyone is welcome to come to that. And then we just secured, we're going to have a opening party at Rudy's Bar and Grill on Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. Again, free to attend. If you want to help support the bar by buying a drink, that's fine.
You get a free hot dog.
You don't have to. It's totally free to come and just hang out with us. And it's going to be in their backyard. So
nice.
It won't be pouring rain, but if it is, it's covered. We'll be there anyway.
Right. We're going to try to do as many events as we can at some of the bars.
Right. We're going to try to do more events, but those are ones where we've definitely secured the time, the date, the location, everything is all set. And Rudy's Bar and Grill, I mean, it's, like I said, not only in the book, but to us, it seemed like the perfect place to kick off the kind of the book launch for one of the bars that's in our book, because it's the true working man / everybody bar. And that's at 627 9th Avenue in Hell's Kitchen. It's between 44th and 45th Street.
Well, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to be my guest. And just, you know, I've watched your YouTube channel. I've, you know, obviously looked through the new book, and, you know, you both are, you know, you're a lot of fun, a lot of just very talented. You've got a great eye for this, obviously. And I'm just encouraged about, you know, how bright the future is and seeing your future projects. So I just want to thank you both for being with me, being my guest on the show.
Oh, no, thank you. We really love sharing, our stories and our work with you guys. It's an honor.
Well, thanks again. And I want to, let our listeners know that they can take a look and see what James and Karla have going on and upcoming. Go to the website, go to their social media on Instagram and elsewhere. You can take a look and see what I have going on. I've got a tremendous amount of things happening in terms of Major League Baseball photography. The NFL's getting ready to kick off. So if you'd like to, probably Mitch Stringer Images on Instagram is the day-to-day update. If you'd like to look longer term, MitchStringerImages.com. On the internet, you can check that out as well. Until next time, I wish you great light. I wish you happy shooting, and we'll talk again soon.